Jack Harding had always lived alone. His ranch was a quiet place far from the nearest town. Every morning the sun would rise over the wide desert, painting the sand and rocks with shades of gold and pink. Jack liked the peace. He liked the silence. For years he had risen with the sun, fed the cattle, checked the fences, and repaired whatever needed fixing. It was a simple life, a lonely life, but it was his. He did not complain. In fact, he had grown used to being alone. He thought he liked it. He thought he wanted it. On this morning, however, something was different. Jack woke to a strange sound. It was soft, almost like whispers carried by the wind, but steady. He opened his eyes, expecting to see the familiar empty porch. Instead, 3 figures stood there. 3 young women, quiet and still, their dark hair catching the first rays of sunlight. They looked tired. Their clothes were dusty from travel. Their eyes were alert and curious, studying the small wooden house as if it were part of a story they had stumbled into. Jack rubbed his eyes. "What in the world?" he muttered, sitting up. For a moment he thought he was dreaming. He had lived alone for so long that the idea of visitors seemed impossible. The figures did not move away. They only waited, standing side by side. Jack could see that they were sisters. There was something about them, a resemblance in the way they held themselves, the tilt of their heads, the way their eyes looked at the world. Cautious but brave. Cautiously, Jack got out of bed. He opened the door and stepped onto the porch, keeping his hands relaxed so as not to seem threatening. "Good morning," he said, his voice rough from sleep. The sisters did not speak at first. They only nodded slightly. Jack noticed the youngest of the 3, standing a little closer to the others, her eyes not looking away. There was a quiet confidence about her, a calmness that made Jack uneasy and curious at the same time. "Are you lost?" Jack asked, squinting against the sunlight. The sisters exchanged glances, and finally the oldest spoke. Her voice was soft but clear. We are looking for our relatives," she said. "We were traveling, but the storm came last night. We lost our way." Jack nodded, understanding immediately. The desert could be dangerous, especially after a storm. Sand would cover tracks, water would wash away paths, and even the most experienced travelers could lose their direction. "Come inside," Jack said, stepping back. He felt a strange mix of caution and kindness. "You should not stay outside like this." The sisters moved in quietly, their movements careful, respectful. Jack noticed the youngest glance around the small house, her eyes taking in the wooden walls, the simple furniture, the cowhide rug near the fireplace. There was a curiosity there, but no judgment. It was as if she were studying a different world, one she had never known before. Inside, Jack went to the kitchen and started preparing a simple breakfast. He cracked eggs into a pan, the sound loud in the quiet house. He could feel the sisters watching him. The oldest took a seat near the window, her hands folded neatly in her lap. The middle one hovered closer to the door, unsure of where to sit. And the youngest, the one who had caught Jack's attention on the porch, leaned against the wall, silent but attentive. There was something unusual about her, a presence that felt calm and strong at the same time. Jack set plates on the table, adding bread and some cheese he had stored in the pantry. "Eat," he said simply. The sisters hesitated, then began to take the food. They did not speak much, only small murmurs of thanks. Jack watched them. He had never had guests before, let alone young women who had traveled through the desert to find shelter. He could feel a mixture of responsibility and curiosity growing inside him. After a while, Jack sat down across from them. "Where exactly were you headed?" he asked. The eldest sister spoke again, explaining that they had been on their way to a small settlement where relatives lived. They had grown tired from walking and caught in the storm, had found themselves wandering in the open desert with no clear path. Jack listened, nodding. He could see the exhaustion in their faces, the dryness in their skin from the wind and sun. He felt a twinge of sympathy. He knew how dangerous the desert could be. "You shouldn't go back out today," Jack said finally. "The storm will make it worse. Stay here until it clears." The sisters nodded silently. Jack noticed the youngest smile faintly at him. It was a small, quiet gesture, almost invisible, but it made Jack's chest tighten. There was something in her eyes, a quiet trust that he had not seen in a long time. For the next hour, they talked in small sentences. Jack asked questions about their journey, about the land they came from, about their family. The sisters answered, careful with their words, but they spoke with honesty. Jack could feel the tension slowly leaving the room, replaced with a quiet understanding. He began to see them not as strangers, but as three human beings who had crossed paths with him for a reason. After breakfast, Jack suggested they step outside to see the ranch. He showed them the fields, the cattle grazing peacefully, and the small corral where he kept the horses. The sisters moved carefully among the animals, their hands brushing the soft fur, their eyes wide with wonder. The youngest lingered near a small foal, reaching out to touch it. Jack watched, feeling something unfamiliar stir inside him, a sense of connection, not just to the animals but to the people who had suddenly entered his life. The sun climbed higher in the sky, and the warmth of the day began to soften the chill from the storm. Jack offered the sisters blankets to sit on the porch, and they accepted. They sat quietly, looking out at the vast desert, each lost in their thoughts. Jack joined them, leaning against the railing. He did not know what to say. Words felt unnecessary. There was a peace in simply being together. In the silence filled with trust and unspoken understanding, the youngest sister, Sienna, shifted slightly, turning her gaze toward Jack. He noticed the subtle glance, the quiet acknowledgement of his presence. She did not speak, but there was a softness in her eyes that made him feel less alone than he had in years. He realized that this simple morning, unexpected and strange, had already begun to change him. Hours passed. Jack found himself telling stories of life on the ranch, of storms and cattle, of days spent repairing fences and feeding animals. The sisters listened, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just watching. The bond between them grew, not through grand gestures or loud conversations, but through small moments of trust, shared space, and mutual respect. Jack realized that these three sisters had brought something into his life he had forgotten existed, the warmth of human connection. As the afternoon wore on, Jack prepared a simple lunch. He did not expect much, but the sisters joined him at the table. Their conversation remained quiet, respectful, and kind. There was laughter now, small and gentle, and Jack felt a lightness he had not known for years. He looked at Sienna, sitting quietly across from him, and noticed the small gestures, the way she brushed her hair back, the way her eyes followed the birds outside, the way she seemed to understand without speaking. By the time the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jack felt something he had long thought impossible. The house no longer felt empty. The desert outside no longer seemed lonely. The three sisters had brought life into his world, and with it, a reminder that trust and kindness could cross boundaries, even those built by years of solitude. That evening, as Jack prepared dinner, he realized the day had changed everything. What began as an ordinary morning, broken only by the sound of wind and an empty porch, had turned into a day of connection, understanding, and quiet wonder. He did not know how long the sisters would stay. He did not know what tomorrow would bring. But for now, he was not alone. And for the first time in many years, Jack Harding felt something he had forgotten: hope. The night fell, and the desert became quiet again. The sisters sat on the porch wrapped in blankets while Jack lit a small fire in the hearth. They did not speak much, but the silence was comfortable. Jack realized that this was the beginning of something important, something that might change the course of his lonely life forever. The storm that had brought the sisters here had also brought new possibilities, new connections, and a reminder that even in the vast empty desert, human hearts could meet and understand each other. And as Jack lay down to rest that night, he could not help but glance toward the porch. Three silhouettes were outlined against the fading light, and in that simple moment he felt that life, even in its most unexpected ways, could be full of surprises. The morning after the storm, Jack Harding woke to the familiar sound of wind moving through the trees and the soft calls of distant birds. He stretched and yawned, thinking about the unusual visitors who had arrived on his porch the day before. The three sisters were still there, sitting quietly on the porch, wrapped in blankets. They were awake early, as if the desert had become part of their rhythm overnight. Jack felt a mixture of curiosity and responsibility. He had never had guests before, and now he found himself thinking about them constantly. He stepped outside, his boots crunching on the dry ground, and greeted them with a nod. "Good morning," he said. The sisters looked up and returned his greeting, their expressions calm but alert. Sienna, the youngest, gave a small smile. Jack noticed it and felt a warmth spread through him. It was subtle, but it carried meaning. She trusted him even without words. Jack went inside to start breakfast. He cracked eggs into a pan, the sound echoing softly in the quiet house. He added bread to the table and some fruit he had saved for himself. The sisters moved with ease now, more comfortable in the space. Maya, the oldest, poured water into glasses and set them on the table. Lila, the middle sister, helped carry the food. Sienna lingered near the window, looking out at the sunrise, her fingers tracing the outline of the horizon. Jack watched them carefully. He could see how tired they still were from the storm, but there was also a quiet strength in each of them. He admired their courage. They had traveled through the desert, survived the storm, and now sat calmly in a stranger's home. It made him realize that life outside the ranch could be just as challenging as life within it. As they ate, Jack asked about their journey. Maya spoke first. She described the long walk through the desert, the sudden winds and the rain that soaked them to the skin. Lila added details about the small streams they had crossed and the sand dunes that seemed endless. Sienna listened quietly, nodding occasionally, and Jack could see her eyes reflect both fear and determination. She did not speak much, but her presence was strong and noticeable. After breakfast, Jack suggested they take a walk around the ranch. He wanted them to see the fields, the cattle, and the horses. They agreed, moving carefully across the wooden floor and stepping onto the soft earth. The sun was higher now, warming the desert and making the shadows shorter. Jack led them to the corral first. A few horses nickered and moved toward them, curious about the visitors. The sisters smiled at the animals, their faces lighting up with wonder. Sienna approached a small foal, reaching out slowly to touch it. The foal sniffed her hand and nuzzled gently. Jack watched, impressed by her gentleness. She did not rush, did not frighten the animal, but moved with care and respect. He realized that she had a patience and understanding beyond her years. Maya and Lila moved closer, watching Sienna interact with the foal. There was pride in their eyes, but also a shared understanding of the hardships they had faced together. Jack showed them the rest of the ranch. He led them to the fields, explaining how he rotated crops and cared for the soil. He showed them the barn where he kept tools and feed, and even the small pond where the cattle drank. The sisters listened intently, asking questions occasionally. They wanted to understand the life Jack led, the work that went into maintaining a ranch in such a remote area. Jack felt a sense of connection as he spoke. For the first time in years, he felt that someone cared about the details of his life. After the tour, they returned to the porch. Jack brought blankets and they sat together, enjoying the warmth of the sun. Silence fell over them, but it was not uncomfortable. It was a shared silence, a space where trust and understanding could grow. Jack looked at Sienna, noticing the way she watched the horizon, the quiet confidence in her eyes. He felt a protective instinct rise within him, a desire to ensure her safety and comfort. The sisters began to tell stories of their own. Maya spoke of their home, a small village not far from the desert edge. She described the traditions, the festivals, and the people they loved. Lila added memories of games and adventures from their childhood. Sienna spoke less, but when she did, her words were thoughtful and sincere. Jack listened, captivated by the vivid pictures they painted of their lives. He realized that these stories were not just entertainment. They were windows into who they were, their values, and their resilience. Jack shared some stories of his own. He spoke of storms he had survived, of the animals he had raised, and of the challenges of living alone in the desert. The sisters listened with interest, sometimes asking questions, sometimes just observing. There was a sense of mutual respect forming between them. Jack noticed that Sienna's eyes often met his when he spoke, as if she was measuring his character, understanding his intentions without needing to ask. By midday, Jack suggested a small task. He asked the sisters if they would help him feed the animals. It was simple work, but it required attention and care. Maya and Lila moved efficiently, distributing hay and checking water troughs. Sienna followed, her movements precise and deliberate. Jack noticed how she handled the animals, the way she spoke softly to them, earning their trust. He realized that her quiet strength was as valuable as the energy and knowledge her sisters brought. While they worked, a bond began to form. Jack noticed small gestures of care and respect between the sisters and himself. They listened when he spoke, followed his instructions without hesitation, and occasionally offered advice or observations. There was no need for words to express the growing trust. It was visible in their eyes, in their movements, in the way they interacted with each other and with Jack. After the work was done, they returned to the porch again. The sisters were tired but satisfied. Jack brought them water and fruit, and they sat quietly, enjoying the calm of the afternoon. Sienna, as usual, remained slightly apart, but her presence was noticeable. She watched the clouds drift across the sky, her expression thoughtful. Jack felt a strange sense of peace. For the first time in years, he was not alone in his thoughts. The sisters' presence had filled a space in his life he had forgotten existed. As the sun began to lower, Jack suggested they prepare a simple dinner together. They worked in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, stirring pots, and sharing small tasks. There was laughter now, gentle and genuine, filling the house with warmth. Jack noticed how the sisters complemented each other, their movements synchronized, their words and gestures in harmony. Even Sienna, usually quiet, participated with a small smile and careful attention. By the time dinner was ready, the house felt alive. The storm had left a mark on their journey, but it had also brought them together. Jack realized that these three sisters had changed his life in just a short time. They had brought warmth, connection, and a sense of family he had not known he needed. He felt gratitude not just for their presence, but for the lessons they had unknowingly shared: patience, resilience, and trust. After dinner, they moved to the porch again. Jack built a small fire in the hearth, the flames casting a soft glow on the wooden walls. The sisters sat quietly, wrapped in blankets, watching the fire and listening to the wind outside. The desert was calm now, peaceful, and the world seemed suspended in that moment. Jack looked at Sienna, noticing the quiet intelligence and strength in her eyes. He felt a protective feeling, a desire to keep her safe and comfortable, but also a recognition that she was strong enough to face challenges on her own. As night fell, the sky filled with stars. The sisters pointed out constellations, sharing stories from their culture about the stars in the desert. Jack listened, fascinated. He had always known the desert was beautiful, but hearing the stories added a new layer of meaning. The stars were no longer just points of light. They were guides, symbols, and reminders of the vastness of life and the connections that could be formed even in the most remote places. Jack realized that this day had changed everything. What began as a quiet morning with unexpected visitors had grown into a day of understanding, trust, and connection. He could see the sisters not as strangers, but as individuals with stories, courage, and wisdom. And in return, they saw him as more than a lonely rancher. They saw someone capable of care, patience, and strength. Before bed, Jack stepped outside one last time. The desert was silent except for the soft rustle of wind and the occasional call of an owl. He looked at the three sisters sitting quietly on the porch, wrapped in blankets, and felt a deep sense of gratitude. They had arrived unexpectedly, and yet their presence had filled his life with warmth and meaning. He knew the journey was not over, but he also knew that whatever came next, they had formed a bond that could not easily be broken. Jack went inside and prepared for bed. He felt a sense of calm he had not known in years. The day had been full of simple tasks, shared stories, and quiet moments of understanding. He realized that life could surprise him, even in the most unexpected ways. And as he lay down, listening to the soft night sounds of the desert, he thought about the sisters, especially Sienna. She had a quiet strength and wisdom that was remarkable for her age. She had silently earned his respect, trust, and attention. And he knew that tomorrow, and the days after, would continue to reveal more about them, and perhaps about himself as well. The next morning, the desert was calm and quiet. Jack Harding woke to the golden light spilling over the horizon. The three sisters were already awake, sitting on the porch wrapped in blankets, their eyes following the distant hills. Jack stretched and stepped outside, feeling the warmth of the sun on his face. He could see the calm in their expressions, but he knew from experience that the desert could change suddenly. After breakfast, Jack suggested they check the cattle. He led the sisters across the open fields, showing them the paths he followed and the spots where the animals liked to graze. Maya and Lila moved confidently beside him, asking questions about the cattle and the land. Sienna followed quietly, observing everything. Her calm demeanor was reassuring, and Jack found himself enjoying the simple presence of someone who could quietly understand without needing much explanation. As they walked, Jack noticed smoke rising in the distance. At first he thought it might be a small fire, A controlled burn perhaps, but then he saw the orange glow flickering among the trees near the edge of the ranch. His heart raced. Fires could spread quickly in the dry desert, and the wind had begun to pick up. "We need to move fast," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "That fire could reach the fields if it grows." The sisters followed closely as Jack ran toward the smoke. They moved quickly but carefully, staying close to each other. Jack could see the fear in their eyes, but also determination. They were not simply following orders. They were thinking, assessing, and helping. Maya pointed out a dry patch of grass where sparks were catching. Lila helped gather small rocks and dirt to create a barrier. Sienna moved with quiet precision, checking the smaller plants and bushes to prevent the fire from spreading. Jack felt a surge of admiration. These sisters were brave and resourceful, even in a crisis. He had never experienced teamwork like this on his ranch before. Usually it was just him and the animals, the wind and the sun. But now there were others who cared deeply about the land and the life on it. Together they worked quickly to control the fire, using dirt, water, and whatever tools they had on hand. The smoke grew thicker, and Jack could feel the heat on his face. The sisters stayed close, each focused on a task. Jack noticed Sienna carrying water from the pond to douse the flames that threatened the smaller shrubs. She moved carefully, placing the water exactly where it was needed. Jack could see her muscles tense and relax with each movement, her concentration complete. He felt a deep respect for her, not just for her strength but for her intelligence and bravery. As the fire grew, Jack realized they needed to move the younger cattle to safety. He whistled sharply, and the animals began to stir. The sisters helped guide them, using soft voices and gentle gestures. Sienna stayed near a small calf that had wandered too close to the flames. She gently lifted a branch, blocking its path, and guided it back to safety. Jack was impressed by her courage. She did not hesitate or panic. She simply did what needed to be done. Maya and Lila worked alongside Jack, keeping the other cattle calm and moving them toward the fenced area. The fire crackled and hissed, but together, they managed to contain it before it could reach the barns or the main field. Jack wiped sweat from his brow, breathing heavily, but a sense of accomplishment filled him. They had faced a real threat, and they had succeeded together. Once the fire was under control, Jack called the sisters over. "You all did well," he said, his voice filled with genuine appreciation. "I could not have done this alone. You stayed calm, focused, and strong. I am grateful for your help." The sisters smiled quietly, accepting the praise without fuss. Sienna gave a small nod, her eyes meeting Jack's with a look that said more than words could express. He understood that she had felt the danger, faced it, and acted with courage. They returned to the house, tired but relieved. Jack went inside to fetch water and towels for everyone, while the sisters rested on the porch. The desert air was warm, but their bodies were tired from the exertion. Jack noticed how they leaned against each other for support, sharing strength without needing to speak. He realized that the morning had done more than test their physical abilities. It had built trust, forged a bond, and deepened the connection between them. After they rested, Jack suggested they have lunch. He prepared sandwiches and fresh fruit, and the sisters helped set the table. Conversation was quiet but comfortable. Maya spoke of the challenges they had faced traveling through the desert before arriving at his ranch. Lila shared memories of their childhood adventures, climbing trees and exploring hidden trails near their home. Sienna, as usual, spoke less, but when she did, her words were thoughtful and insightful. Jack listened, fascinated by the stories. He realized that these sisters had endured hardships and challenges far beyond his own experience. Yet they were kind, respectful, and willing to help him in return. The fire had tested them, but it had also shown their character. Jack felt a growing sense of admiration and responsibility. He wanted to ensure they were safe, comfortable, and respected in his home. After lunch, Jack suggested they inspect the fences and check the animals again. The fire had left small patches of scorched grass, and he wanted to make sure the ranch was secure. The sisters agreed, moving with energy despite their fatigue. Jack led them across the property, pointing out weak spots in the fences and explaining how to repair them. Maya took charge of one section, Lila another, and Sienna moved with him to check the irrigation and water supply. Jack was impressed by Sienna's attention to detail. She noticed small problems he had missed, suggesting ways to strengthen the fences and protect the fields. Her insights were practical and effective, Jack realized that she had a natural ability to observe, think critically, and act decisively. He felt gratitude for her presence and for the way she had helped him manage the crisis. As the sun began to dip in the sky, they returned to the house. Jack felt a deep sense of relief. The fire had been contained, the animals were safe, and the sisters had proven themselves brave and capable. He knew that the experience had changed something in all of them. They had faced danger together, and now there was a shared bond, a connection built on trust, respect, and courage. That evening, Jack built a fire on the porch. The sisters sat around it wrapped in blankets, watching the flames flicker. There was quiet laughter now, small moments of joy after a day of tension and fear. Sienna sat slightly apart, but her presence was strong. Jack could see her reflecting on the day, perhaps thinking about the challenges they had faced and the teamwork that had kept them safe. Jack sat close to her, careful not to intrude, but feeling the need to share the quiet moment. "You were amazing today," he said softly. "I have never seen anyone so calm and precise in a dangerous situation. You helped save this ranch." Sienna looked at him and nodded slightly, her eyes reflecting both pride and humility. She did not speak, but Jack understood. She had faced danger, acted with courage, and now felt the satisfaction of a job well done. The sisters shared stories of their home again, talking about the traditions, the land, and the people they loved. Jack listened, fascinated. He realized that the fire had not only tested them physically, but had also created a deeper emotional connection. They trusted him and he trusted them. They had become more than visitors. They had become partners in a shared experience, a bond forged in the heat of challenge and the quiet of mutual respect. As night fell, the stars appeared in the clear desert sky. Jack pointed out constellations, sharing stories from his own childhood about the stars and the land. The sisters listened intently, adding their own stories and perspectives. Sienna's eyes shone in the firelight, thoughtful and calm. Jack felt a deep sense of connection. The day had been exhausting, but it had also been transformative. Before bed, Jack walked around the ranch one last time. The fire had left a mark, but the land was safe. The animals were secure. The sisters were resting peacefully in the house. Jack realized that their visit had changed him. He had always lived alone, but now he understood the value of connection, trust, and shared effort. The experience had reminded him that life was richer when it was shared with others, even strangers who became friends through circumstance and courage. Jack returned inside, feeling a sense of calm and hope. The day had been challenging, but it had also been meaningful. The sisters had shown bravery, intelligence, and kindness. They had helped him in ways he could never have imagined. And in return, they had gained trust, shelter, and perhaps a new understanding of what it meant to be cared for in a strange place. As he lay down to sleep that night, Jack looked toward the porch. The sisters' silhouettes were visible in the firelight, peaceful and calm. He felt a sense of gratitude and respect, knowing that the day had forged a bond that would remain long after they left. The fire, which had threatened destruction, had instead brought growth, connection, and a reminder that courage and trust could change lives in unexpected ways. The morning after the fire, the desert was quiet, with only the gentle whisper of wind moving through the dry grass and trees. Jack Harding woke early as usual, stretching his arms and rubbing the sleep from his eyes. The events of the previous day were still fresh in his mind. The fire, the fear, the teamwork, it had all left a deep impression on him. But even more than that, the presence of the three sisters lingered in his thoughts. They had brought life into his quiet ranch, and their courage and determination had left him feeling a mix of gratitude, admiration, and something he did not fully understand. When he stepped outside, he found the sisters already awake, sitting on the porch wrapped in blankets. Maya was carefully observing the ranch, noting the areas that had been affected by the fire. Lila was tending to a few small tasks, moving quietly around the porch. And Sienna, as always, remained slightly apart, watching the horizon with a calm but thoughtful expression. Jack felt an unusual sense of awareness as he looked at her. There was something in the way she carried herself, a quiet confidence and a depth in her eyes that made him feel protective yet respectful. He called out a greeting, and the sisters responded with smiles. Jack noticed that their movements were slower this morning, the physical exertion from the fire leaving them weary. He suggested breakfast, and the sisters followed him inside. The morning meal was simple, but there was a sense of comfort in the act of preparing and sharing it together. They spoke in soft, careful tones, exchanging stories about their journey and reflecting on the fire. Jack noticed the subtle way Sienna listened, occasionally glancing at him as if trying to read his thoughts without needing to ask. After breakfast, Jack suggested they do some small tasks around the ranch to ensure everything was in order. Maya and Lila jumped in eagerly while Sienna followed quietly, offering suggestions when necessary. As they worked, Jack felt the weight of his own emotions pressing lightly on his chest. He had lived alone for so long that he had almost forgotten how much it mattered to have others around, to share responsibility and care. Yet with that feeling came a conflict he did not fully understand. Admiration for Sienna's quiet strength mixed with a cautious awareness that he could not misread the trust she had placed in him. By midday, the sisters had begun to settle into a rhythm. They moved confidently across the ranch, their actions precise and careful. Jack observed them with growing appreciation. The fire had revealed their courage, but now he could see their kindness, patience, and resilience. Each of them had their own way of contributing, and together they created a sense of harmony on the ranch. It was the kind of bond that did not require words, a silent understanding that connected them. Jack felt his thoughts turning inward. He realized that he had started to feel an attachment to Sienna that went beyond simple gratitude. Her quiet strength, her careful attention to the animals and the land, and the subtle way she had engaged with him had created a connection he had not expected, but he also knew he must respect her space and maintain the boundaries of trust they had built. He could not let his emotions interfere with the safe and respectful environment he had promised for all three sisters. As the afternoon sun climbed higher, a small disagreement arose. Maya wanted to check the fences in one direction, while Lila insisted that another area needed immediate attention. The discussion was calm, but Jack could see the tension rising. He stepped in to mediate, suggesting a compromise that allowed both areas to be inspected. Sienna remained quiet, observing the exchange, her eyes thoughtful. Jack appreciated her calm presence. She had a way of understanding the situation without needing to speak, and her quiet demeanor seemed to remind everyone to act with patience and care. The work continued, and Jack began to feel the subtle shift in his own emotions. He realized that he had begun to depend on their presence not just for help, but for the companionship that had been missing from his life for so long. The fire had brought them together in crisis, but now in the calm moments he noticed how much he valued their company, their laughter, and their quiet conversations. Sienna in particular had a presence that was both comforting and challenging. She had earned his respect, and he felt a deep desire to ensure she felt safe and appreciated. After completing the tasks, Jack suggested a break. They sat on the porch drinking water and watching the desert stretch out before them. The heat of the day was strong, but the shade provided relief. Silence fell over them again, but it was a comfortable silence filled with unspoken understanding. Jack noticed how Sienna shifted slightly, leaning on her hands and gazing at the horizon. Her expression was calm but thoughtful, as if she were weighing her thoughts and emotions carefully. Jack felt a quiet admiration for her ability to reflect and remain composed in every situation. The conversation turned to their past experiences. Maya spoke of the challenges they had faced traveling through the desert, and Lila added stories from their childhood that were both humorous and revealing. Sienna remained quiet for most of the conversation, but when she spoke, her words were measured and thoughtful. She described how she had learned to face challenges calmly, to observe carefully, and to act decisively when necessary. Jack listened intently, realizing that her perspective was shaped by experience and wisdom beyond her years. As the sun began to lower, Jack noticed a subtle tension within himself. He realized that he was starting to care deeply for Sienna, not in a fleeting way, but in a manner that involved respect, admiration, and a desire for her well-being. He struggled internally with these emotions, knowing that he must maintain boundaries and prioritize the trust and safety of all three sisters. Yet he also could not deny the connection he felt, a bond formed through shared experiences, mutual respect, and quiet understanding. Dinner was prepared together, and the atmosphere was calm and warm. They spoke of the day's work, shared small laughs, and reflected on the events that had brought them together. Jack felt a deep sense of appreciation for the sisters' presence. They had transformed the ranch into a place of life and connection, and he realized that his loneliness was beginning to fade. Sienna, in particular, remained slightly apart but was attentive and engaged. Jack admired her restraint and her ability to balance observation with action. After dinner, Jack suggested they sit outside by the fire. The stars were beginning to appear, scattered across the clear desert sky. The firelight flickered on the sisters' faces, highlighting the calm and thoughtful expressions they wore. Jack noticed how Sienna's eyes reflected the flames, thoughtful and steady. He felt a strong desire to protect and support her, yet he reminded himself of the importance of maintaining respect and trust. They spoke softly of the desert, the land, and their hopes for the future. Sienna, when she spoke, offered insights that were profound yet simple. She spoke of patience, observation, and understanding, emphasizing the importance of acting with care and respect. Jack was struck by the wisdom in her words, realizing that she had a deep understanding of the world that extended beyond her years. He felt a quiet admiration, recognizing that her presence had become essential to the sense of balance and harmony on the ranch. As the night deepened, Jack felt a mix of emotions. He was grateful for the sisters' bravery and presence, proud of the way they had contributed to the ranch, and quietly aware of the bond he felt with Sienna. He knew that he must navigate these emotions carefully, maintaining the respect and trust that had been built. He also knew that the connection he felt was not fleeting. It was rooted in shared experiences, mutual care, and the simple act of being present for one another. Before going to bed, Jack took a moment to look out over the desert. The ranch was calm, the animals safe, and the sisters resting peacefully. He reflected on the day, the challenges they had faced, and the quiet moments of understanding that had shaped their bond. He realized that this experience had transformed not just the ranch but himself. The presence of the sisters, and especially Sienna, had reminded him of the importance of trust, care, and human connection. As he lay down to sleep that night, Jack thought about the days ahead. There would be more work, more challenges, and more opportunities to learn from one another. But he also felt a sense of anticipation, a quiet excitement for the bonds that were forming and the lessons that would continue to unfold. He knew that the connection with the sisters, built on trust, respect, and shared experience, was something rare and valuable. And as the fire on the porch cast a soft glow on the house, Jack felt a quiet hope. He understood that the desert, which had once seemed lonely and harsh, had become a place of growth, connection, and understanding. The sisters had brought life into his world, and the bond he felt with them, and with Sienna in particular, was a reminder that even in the quietest and loneliest places, human hearts could meet, trust, and transform one another. The morning sun rose slowly over the desert, painting the horizon in soft shades of gold and orange. Jack Harding awoke with a sense of anticipation he could not fully explain. Today felt different. The three sisters had stayed with him for several days now, and their presence had changed the rhythm of his life. The ranch no longer felt empty, and the quiet walls of his house seemed alive with stories, laughter, and the subtle movements of companionship. But today he sensed that their time together was nearing a natural end. Jack stepped onto the porch and found the sisters already awake, wrapped in blankets and watching the horizon. Maya was the first to notice him, giving a small nod and a smile. Lila looked up and waved, while Sienna, as usual, remained slightly apart, her expression calm but thoughtful. Jack felt a strange mix of emotions, pride in their courage and resilience, gratitude for their companionship, and a subtle ache at the thought of them leaving. He called out softly, "Good morning. Are you ready for the day?" The sisters nodded, and Sienna's eyes met his for a brief moment. There was a quiet understanding in that glance, an acknowledgement of the bond they had formed over the past days. Jack realized that this connection was rare, one that went beyond mere friendship or temporary company. It was built on trust, respect, and shared experiences, and it had grown stronger with each passing day. After a simple breakfast, they prepared for the journey ahead. The sisters packed their belongings carefully, checking that nothing had been left behind. Jack assisted where he could, offering help with the heavier items and ensuring that everything was in order. There was a sense of gentle efficiency in their actions, a rhythm that reflected both care and anticipation. The desert outside was warm and bright, and the air carried the scent of sand and sagebrush. Before they left, Jack walked with the sisters to inspect the ranch one last time. He wanted to ensure that the fences were secure, the animals were safe, and everything was in order for when he returned to his solitary routine. Maya and Lila assisted him with small repairs while Sienna moved quietly alongside him, observing and offering thoughtful suggestions. Jack noticed how her calm and careful approach had become a comfort to him, a reminder of the strength and resilience they had shared during the fire and the days that followed. As they finished their inspection, Jack felt a sense of completion. The ranch was secure, the animals content, and the morning sun warmed the land in a way that made everything seem peaceful and hopeful. Yet he could not ignore the subtle tension in his chest, the knowledge that soon the sisters would leave, and the quiet house would return to its familiar emptiness. He turned to Sienna, meeting her eyes. There was no need for words. They both understood the significance of the moment. Maya broke the silence. "Thank you for everything, Jack," she said softly. "You gave us shelter, safety, and kindness when we needed it most. We will not forget it." Lila nodded in agreement, her eyes shining with gratitude. Jack smiled, feeling warmth in his chest. "It was my pleasure," he said. "You've all been a part of this ranch in ways you might not even realize. I'm grateful for your help, your trust, and your presence." Sienna remained quiet, but she stepped closer, her movements deliberate and calm. She placed her hand lightly on a wooden post of the porch, and for a moment, her eyes met Jack's with a quiet intensity. There was no need for words. In that gesture, Jack understood the trust, respect, and subtle bond that had formed between them. It was a connection built on shared experience, courage, and the understanding that even in the vast emptiness of the desert, human hearts could meet and understand one another. The sisters mounted their horses, ready to continue their journey. Jack watched as they moved, the horses kicking up small clouds of dust as they walked across the ranch. Maya waved, Lila smiled, and Sienna gave a small nod, her eyes lingering on Jack for a brief moment before turning to the horizon. Jack felt a mixture of pride and sorrow. He had grown to rely on their presence, their companionship, and their quiet wisdom, yet he knew that their journey must continue, and he respected their need to return to their own lives and family. As the sisters rode away, Jack felt a profound sense of transformation. The ranch, once a place of solitude and routine, had become a space of connection, growth, and shared responsibility. The experience with the sisters had reminded him of the value of trust, courage, and empathy. He realized that life could surprise him, bringing unexpected encounters that shaped not only his daily routines, but also his understanding of human relationships. After they had disappeared over the horizon, Jack returned to the porch, feeling the familiar quiet of his home settle around him. Yet it was not the same emptiness as before. The lessons, memories, and bonds formed with the sisters lingered, infusing the ranch with a quiet warmth. He walked through the fields, checking the animals and fences, reflecting on the days they had shared. Each task was familiar, yet it carried a new meaning, a reminder of teamwork, trust, and the strength found in connection. Jack spent the afternoon tending to small repairs, moving through the ranch with a renewed sense of purpose. He noticed details he had overlooked before, the way the soil retained moisture after rain, the pattern of sunlight on the fields, and the subtle signs of life in the desert that he had grown accustomed to. The presence of the sisters had sharpened his awareness, teaching him to observe carefully and act thoughtfully. Even in solitude, he felt connected to the lessons they had imparted, the courage they had shown, and the understanding they had shared. As the sun began to dip toward the horizon, Jack built a small fire on the porch. He sat quietly, watching the flames dance in the evening light. Memories of the sisters filled his mind, their bravery during the fire, their laughter, their careful attention to the ranch, and the subtle moments of trust and understanding they had shared. Sienna's quiet presence in particular stood out in his thoughts. Her strength, patience, and reflective nature had left a lasting impression on him. Jack realized that this experience had changed him deeply. He no longer viewed the desert as a place of loneliness, but as a space of opportunity for connection and growth. The sisters had brought warmth, perspective, and life into his solitary world. Their visit had reminded him that even brief encounters could leave lasting impacts, shaping the way he lived, thought, and interacted with the world around him. Night fell, and the stars appeared in the clear desert sky. Jack sat by the fire, reflecting on the transformation that had taken place over the past days. The ranch was secure, the animals were safe, and he felt a renewed sense of purpose. He understood that life was not only about survival and routine, but also about the connections formed, the trust built, and the shared experiences that enriched the heart. He thought of the sisters, especially Sienna, and the quiet strength she had shown. The way she had faced challenges, acted with care, and observed thoughtfully had taught him lessons he would carry forever. He realized that human connection was a powerful force capable of changing perspectives, healing loneliness, and inspiring courage. Even in the quiet, isolated desert, bonds could form that were meaningful, transformative, and lasting. Jack stood and walked to the edge of the porch, looking out over the desert. The land was calm, bathed in the soft light of the rising moon. He felt a sense of hope, knowing that life could continue to bring unexpected encounters and meaningful relationships. The sisters had returned to their own path, but the impact of their visit remained. Jack understood that he had grown as a person, learning patience, trust, and the power of shared experience. Before going to bed, he walked through the ranch one last time that evening. The animals were content, the fences were secure, and the fields were safe. Jack felt a quiet pride in his work, but also gratitude for the lessons he had learned from the sisters. They had brought courage, kindness, and companionship into his life, leaving him with memories that would remain long after they had gone. As he lay down to sleep, Jack reflected on the journey that had begun with the unexpected arrival of 3 sisters on his porch. The storm had brought them together, the fire had tested them, and the days in between had forged bonds of trust, understanding, and respect. He realized that life was full of surprises, and that even in moments of solitude, human connections could appear when least expected. Jack felt a calmness he had not known in years. The ranch, once a place of quiet routine, had become a space of growth, connection, and reflection. The sisters had transformed his world, reminding him of the power of courage, kindness, and trust. He closed his eyes, feeling gratitude, hope, and the quiet joy of having shared a meaningful chapter of life with remarkable individuals who had changed him forever. And as the night deepened and the stars shone over the desert, Jack Harding understood a simple truth. Even the loneliest hearts could find connection, understanding, and friendship in the most unexpected ways. The ranch, the desert, and the memories of the sisters would remain with him. A lasting reminder that life, though sometimes quiet and isolated, was always capable of bringing warmth, trust, and the possibility of transformation.